It's about damn time I settle this debate. Hey guys, Trify, back again with another video. If you don't know, there's been this recent discourse surrounding what exactly makes a counter style first off, and secondly, what exactly is the best counter style in this game. I do feel the first question is pretty simple to answer. A counter style is essentially a style that works best when playing around landing counters. A simple example is counter, with most of its damage coming from counters due to the fact that its M1 and M2 damage is basically doubled or tripled when landing a counter. On the other hand, you have styles like Wolf, which also work best by shaping your playstyle around landing counters. This is because its M2 is actually completely true when you land a counter M2, so you can do M2 into M2, which does more than smash damage raw. On top of that, we also have the fact that due to its really fast M2 and its insane mix-ups, with its basically instant second M2, it probably gets the most counters in a match compared to any other style in this game. Now there's also more niche examples like Hawk, the fact that it also has a counter multiplier, and that's essentially what we'll be clearing up for today. And from that list of counter styles, we'll be determining how good they are based on the following categories: the destructive power of each style, which basically means how strong their base damage and counter damage is; the defensive power of each style, so their anti-fainting capabilities, their double dashing capabilities, and just being able to avoid attacks and have a lot more survivability compared to the other styles in this list. We'll also be looking at the pressure of each style, see how well they can put on pressure and force the other opponent to do some sort of option that as a counter style you can exploit. Finally, there's mix-up potential. Mix-ups are probably the most important aspect of a counter style, since it allows you to mix up where your next punch is going to come from and guess what punch you're going to use next. The more difficult it is, the more likely you're going to be able to land counters, since they're going to be more inclined to make mistakes if your style is less predictable. And yeah, that's basically all there is to it. If you guys like the video, you know what to do. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and join the Discord down below. And of course, massive shout out to the 6 members of the Trife channel: Simon, R-Laws, Probably Dark, Mercenary, Charles Gaming 21, and Lil Z. So getting straight into it, the 5 styles that I consider to be counter styles in this game, not styles with counter multipliers or benefit off counters a lot, styles that revolve around counters, being Wolf, Counter, Hanslow, Chronos, and Bullet. Out of those 5 styles, the worst counter style in this game, in my opinion, is Wolf. Simply because of the fact that its counter-destructive power is basically non-existent. Its M2 is fully true when the first M2 is landed as a counter, and it is also true that it gets a lot of counters from its really fast M2. However, the base destructive power and the counter-destructive power don't allow Wolf to capitalize a lot of counters in terms of its payoff. However, its consistency in landing those counters is commendable. Its defensive power isn't anything exceptional, can't double dash like crazy, similar to Hanslow and Chronos, and its only unique ability is pretty underwhelming, especially since the nerf to how it's landed and consistency in landing the second M2 after the first one, in conjunction with the fact that the M1s are quite slow and the M2 was recently nerfed to be almost as slow as Ippo. The style's mix-up potential was great, but its pressure isn't the best. As a result, I consider this to be the worst counter style in this game. Next up, we have Counter. The reason why I'm putting it right after Wolf is because it's essentially basic with way less damage, worse dashes, but a really good counter multiplier, which is the sole reason I don't consider it the worst counter style in this game, because it just wouldn't be counter style, it'd just be a worse basic. But with that in mind, its base destructive power isn't great, its counter destructive power is very good, its defensive capabilities are pretty mediocre since it can't reliably double dash, and it's required to actually read feints rather than double dash them more often than not, to a similar extent as Wolf. Along with that, the mix-up potential of the style isn't really great because it basically has the same M1 and M2 patterns as basic, which is pretty predictable in itself. Its M1s are very fast, however they are slightly telegraphed more compared to the likes of Chronos and Hanslow, along with the fact that it has the issue of getting accidentally PD'd on a feint due to the fact that the timing on its M1s and its M2 makes it so that same-sided feints are a bit of a weakness with counter. Now for Chronos' base destructive power is pretty poor, along with his counter destructive power due to the fact that it has no counter multiplier on its M1s, which is the most reliable way you can get counters more often than not. However, its defensive capabilities are very good because double dashing with this style against feints is quite reliable. However, it does take 10% more damage. Its mix-up potential is pretty good since there's a 3-part M2 where you get 2 right M2s and then the last one being a left M2, as well as M1s that switch between sides. With the M1s being fast and and not as telegraphed as the likes of counter. The pressure with this style isn't the worst, but the pillar hands on this style when it comes to its block durability damage really holds it back. In focus, however, everything is turned up to 11. Everything about the style is really good. However, it does have more vulnerability to counter intake, and it still has the 10% extra damage intake that really holds it back. Generally speaking, focus is very high risk, high reward. It has the potential to be the best counter style in this game if you can use focus very reliably, but the execution for that makes it pretty impractical, and generally speaking with counter styles, consistency is key. Speaking of which, Hanslow is basically Chronos but tankier and doing more consistent damage, therefore by proxy it is just a better Chronos. In terms of potential, Chronos does surpass it, but if I was to choose between Chronos and Hanslow in a counter based competition, Hanslow wins 9 times out of 10 for me. Simply because of the fact that Hanslow M1s are a dime a dozen with these fast styles. Having such high counter multipliers on your M1s is absolutely crazy, especially since the amount of damage you do is pretty much 1-to-1 with counter. However, the base destructive power is worse than Chronos overall, along with the fact that its dashes are around the same, but that still means it has exceptional defensive capabilities. Along with the fact that its M1s are the least telegraphed in the entire game, they are marginally harder to dodge compared to the likes of Chronos. Its M2s also switch between sides in a 2-part cycle, making them even more reliable for mix-ups. However, with pressure, similar to Chronos, it has very good mix-ups and very fast exchange in return for very poor block damage, which really holds back its pressure. Finally, we have Bullet. This style is essentially counter, but with none of the glaring drawbacks. From the damage actually being somewhat decent, especially on its first M1s, to its pressure being absolutely crazy due to its bullet passive and its mix-up potential being absolutely insane, with the instant jab, along with the fact that it has side-switching M2s and side-switching M1s. It also has long guard range. It really just has a lot going for it, and the only drawback it really has is its dashes, which are completely counteracted by the fact that your opponent can't really double dash against you. So styles like Hanslow and Chronos are pretty much shut down by a good bullet user. Do keep in mind that the M1 counter damage is worse than Hanslow, its M2 counter damage is way better than anything else in this game, and especially against Hanslow and Chronos, it's absolutely deadly. Not even going to mention the damage against Shotgun. It pretty much hard counters Shotgun as it is even after the rework. Generally speaking, it has the best base destructive power out of this entire list, maybe except Wolf. Its counter destructive power is generally better than everything else in this list, especially with the existence of its M2 counters. Its M1 counters are slightly worse than Hanslow, but it's still very much comparable, and it's especially compensated for by the sheer difference in its bullet M2 counter damage, especially against the likes of Hanslow. Along with that fact, the pressure on this style is absolutely crazy with the bullet passive, especially after feints, the range of the style, the damage it does, even on block. It's not very good, but considering how many hits you can land on the block, it's not too bad, and you very reliably land hits. Your mix-up potential with the style is very good with the existence of its bullet passive. You can't double dash the feints very well, if at all, and it has side-switching M2s and side-switching M1s. Bullet is pretty much the ideal counter style, and if you were to choose a style in this game that would feed into your desire to play the mind games, Bullet is the most exceptional choice you can choose. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. If you agree with me, comment in the comment section down below. If you disagree with me, tell me how that's the case. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya.